What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the Fighting Game Tutorial Series, we're going to be going over navigating through the online session list. So you'll notice that when we come into the session list here, I have a list of my sessions and I can pick which one I want to select. It is a little hard to tell because of the colors, but you'll notice that they are all light blue except for one. The one that is gray is the one that I'm currently selecting. You'll see that this box can also scroll up and down, so as I reach the bottom element, there is a new one, and there is a scroll that occurs. This allows us to navigate through the session list, and this is important because after the previous online episode, we had created the session list, and we were able to see the session details for the other online sessions, but we weren't able to select one to actually go to. With this update, we will be able to navigate through them. We won't be able to select one yet. There's a lot of logic that has to happen when we actually try to connect to a session. So that'll be related to the next session list episode, the next online episode. I just wanted to be able to make sure we could navigate through them first. That way we don't have to worry about this when we're dealing with all the other trying to join a session logic. Right now I have temporary sessions in here, so I just added a lot of them to my widget in a vertical box so I can see it. For me and for the videos, I only have one session available because it's just me testing with myself. But I wanted to make sure it was scalable and it would work with all these sessions available so that when you make your game and you have all sorts of people playing at the same time, you can see them all and you can pick the right session. Alright, so for those of you that are following the Patreon and the YouTube membership, I want to give a huge shout out to you, a huge thank you to you. You guys are awesome. I really am grateful for it. You can get the templates for free once they are released on the Epic Marketplace if you support several of the tiers. So it could save you a lot of time and money if you're interested in that sort of thing. If you're not, no worries. The tutorials are going to continue and they're going to go the whole way through the entire game that we make, and you can follow along that way. Now, before we get into this episode, if you want to get caught up in the series and see how we've done all these cool things like these awesome attacks, the scorpion get over here move, the online play that we have going on, or things related to rollback, I recommend you check out this series right here. There's a playlist in the top right corner. You can click it to check out every episode. If you don't care about that and you just care about the session list navigation, I will link you to this episode right here, which is the previous episode where we created the session list and filled out the data as it came in from other online sessions. And with those things out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So we are going to want to go to our session list. For me, that is in my widgets folder, and it is the session list widget. In the previous episode of the session list, we had the title, the background, the sessions vertical box, and the back button. I have added a scroll box in here as well to actually be able to hold all of the things in the vertical box so that it scrolls like I was showing you during the demo. If you want this behavior, it's very simple. You'll have this sessions vertical box from the previous episode, and we can add a scroll box. I put it under the sessions text here. And I just made sure I brought my sessions vertical box and made it a child of the session list scroll box. With the sessions vertical box as a child of the scroll box, it will automatically scroll for you. So I'll show you the settings that I have, but most of the implementation is already going to be in here and finished. The rest of it is up to you. So over here in my details panel, I called it the session list scroll box, and I made sure that it is a variable. We do need this because we're going to edit it in the graph when we move to certain elements. So make sure this is checked. Didn't use any anchors. Here are my position and sizing values to get this effect that you see on screen. And I made the scroll bar visibility hidden. It's not required that you do that either, but if it's visible, it looks like this when you come into the game. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just didn't need it, so I set it to hidden. If you want to keep it, keep it. The rest is all the same. So it's a very simple scroll box, and that will allow us to scroll when we navigate below what we can see on the screen. So that's a nice little handy thing that we have going on there. Now, before we get into the actual logic, there is one other thing I want to do. I want to go to our session list element. These are the individual elements that we have made for the session list. When you are in your session list, you are probably going to see something like this. it'll be all empty. If you would like to test the navigation of the session list without actually launching that many online instances, you can do this by going to your palette and searching for our session list element widget and just dragging them into the session's vertical box. You can also copy them, click on them, Control C, click on the vertical box, Control V to paste them, and you can add a lot in here if you want. I just did this again so I don't have to have that many sessions going to actually test this. These are all temporary and they won't stay like this. This is just for testing and for navigation purposes. But you may want to do that, so if you want to follow that, that's how I did it. Now, additionally, while we have the session list element open, this session background is the actual border or the frame of the session element itself. I made sure that that was marked as a variable. We're going to need that today. So make sure you go ahead and make this image a variable. It was not previously, at least not for me. So make sure you go and do that. That is very important for today's episode. All right, now we can go back to the session list and we can go into the graph. And at this point, in event construct, we were setting the session list reference so that we could get the appropriate data from it. But we also need to be able to navigate this, and I want to use our new and improved navigation system that we've used for some of the newer widgets. That is our menu or widget navigation interface. The first thing we want to do is when we come into our session list widget, we go to class settings and we go to interfaces, and we want to include or implement our widget navigation interface. To do that, we can press add with the down arrow and select it in this list. You can't see it because I've already added it, so it gets removed from this list, but if you haven't added it, it will be here for you. This is an interface that we added in a previous episode. I believe it was implemented with the command list widget. And I'm going to go to that widget in the code right now. Now I have these classes, the widget navigation interface.h and .cpp, and it has the functions for move up, move down, confirm, back, and any key. For today's episode, we need move up, move down. We don't need to confirm yet, but we will. And the back we can also implement whenever. You don't have to change anything in here. I was just giving you a refresher. Where we need to go is the base player controller, because the player controller is where we can implement the up and down movement or the confirm and back movement. So if we go to our base player controller.cpp, we can scroll down to the up and down functions that we have. I have menu up and down functions in here that we set up during that episode. We have menu up, menu down, menu confirm. These functions weren't really working for the widgets the way we need them to be. They were working for demonstration purposes, which is what we were using them for, but now that we're going to start using them for other widgets, we need to make a few changes. So the first thing that I had in here was this commented out if statement. And it was if this get class implements interface uWidget navigation interface static class. And basically what this means is if the class of the player controller implemented this interface, we could go into this logic. We are not checking if the player controller implements this interface here. Now what we want to check is if the current widget implements the interface, because we have this current widget set up and it tracks what widget is currently on the screen. We only have to do this for certain widgets, and I've gone over it where it's been necessary. We're going to add it today for our session list. When we do this, the controller will know that we are on the session list. If we're on the session list, then we want to actually perform the menu up, menu down, menu confirm functions. So I've taken this line that's commented out and I've changed it. It's all the same except this keyword has been changed to the current widget. So I'm getting rid of this one and replacing it with this line right here. And this is the same for menu up, menu down, and menu confirm. Okay, so all three of those functions are going to have that line changed to use current widget get class implements interface. Since we are using this current widget reference though, it could be invalid. If we haven't set the current widget, it will be null. And if it's null, it will crash when we're trying to determine the class of a null object. So we want to make sure that we add the if current widget ahead of this logic. And we want to do that for all three of these functions. So now our function looks like if current widget, and then if current widget get class. You'll notice we've done this elsewhere in this file already, so this isn't super new. If we go down to the determine input device details, we were checking the current widget, and if the current widget implemented this interface. This wasn't exactly for the same thing, but you can see it's the same method here. So don't be confused. We're just changing it from using the player controller as the object that implements the interface to the individual widget that we are on. Now there's one other change we have to make in all of these functions, and that is the line inside of this if statement. So it was previously doing iWidget navigation interface : execute and then the name of the function. So in menu up, it was calling execute _ move up. Previously, it was passing this, but again, we don't care about this anymore. We don't care about the controller. We care about the widget that we are in. So I've made a new line here and passed in current widget instead of this. So I can delete this logic. And now my menu up function in my base player controller looks like that. And I want to do this for menu up, menu down, and menu confirm. If you've been following the series, basically just make your functions look like this now. This will make it so the current widget that we're on is what has these functions called on it, and we can truly use our base player controller and our widget navigation interface to navigate through our widgets, which makes our lives a lot easier. That is all we need to do in the base player controller. Now we can go back into the editor. At this point, what we want to do is scroll over an event construct after we set the session list reference in the game mode BP, and we need to assign that current widget variable that we were just messing with in the code. A very simple way to do this is to just grab the first player controller and cast to the base player controller class here. This will work because the only player that needs to be on the session list is player 0, or player index 0. So we can get player controller, cast to base player controller, and this is the class we were just working in, and we have that current widget variable. So set current widget, and the current widget that we are setting is self. We are in the session list, so when the session list loads, the current widget is the session list. So self, get a reference to self. And then we get this logic right here. Now there is one other thing that we're going to do in event construct now, but to understand what we're doing, we need to set up two variables. We need to set up a current index and a max selections variable in the session list widget. So I've made two more variables: current index, which is an integer that's defaulted to 0, and max selections, which is an integer that's also defaulted to 0. Current index is the index in the vertical box that we are hovering over, that we are selecting. And so starting out, we should be on index 0, the top one. The next one down will be index 1, next one after that index 2, so on and so forth. The max selections is the highest possible number, or really the bottom element in the vertical box. In this case, it is session list element _6, but really it's index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So to set max selections when we have data already in here, we can simply grab the sessions vertical box, get the children count, because that will be all of our session list elements, and set our max selections variable that we just made to the return value. This will let us navigate properly through all the session list elements in our scroll box and in our vertical box. Note that this will only work when using this temporary system. When the session list opens, it has to find the other sessions as they become available, and so we will have to update max selections according to that. I actually do show that in this episode, but I just want you to know that this will be 0 starting out if you don't have temporary data in here like we do. So this won't really yield the results you need. This is only for the testing purposes. All right, and that is our event construct. The back button remains the same. There's nothing that we have to change in here. But now I want to implement my move up and move down events that come from the widget navigation interface. So these are what we were calling in the base player controller. When they're called on this widget, these events are going to determine what actually happens. Once you have included the widget navigation interface here and implemented it, you will be able to find these events simply by searching event move up. And you'll see the target is the widget navigation interface. And then event move down. Once you have these two events on the screen, we can start figuring out the logic of moving up and down. So to move up, basically, we want to subtract 1 from the current index. If we can subtract 1 from the current index and it's not less than the minimum value in the session list vertical box, then we can move up. It's pretty much that simple. So we want to take our current index and subtract 1 from it. So current index, integer minus integer, 1, and check if this is greater than or equal to the minimum value in our session list vertical box, which is 0. If it is, this branch returns true, then we want to set the current index equal to the result of current index minus 1. Just like that. That's what we've got right here. And so basically, say we are on index 1 in the session list vertical box. If we move up, we want to subtract 1 from the current index, which is going to put us at index 0, in which case we can successfully move up. If this branch returns false, this means that the current index is not greater than or equal to 0, so the result is -1 or something like that. If that's the case, there's no reason to move up. We want to just stay at the entry we're on. We are at the top entry already. Now, move down is really the same thing, slightly different because we have to check against the maximum value to see if we can move down or not. So we want to grab our current index, and we want to do integer plus integer. And then we want to check if that's less than the max selections. Right? We're not checking against 0 because 0 is the minimum. We have to check against the maximum, which is our max selections variable. So we bring that into the branch. And if that returns true, then we want to set current index to the result of current index plus 1. And that's what we have right here. And that's actually all we need for our moving up and down. We do need to do stuff to make it visually work so that we can see what selection we're on, but logically that's all we need to move up and down. At this point, we need to make a new function that I've called determine selection. So if we add a function here, call it determine selection, we can call it both when moving up and moving down. To call a function, by the way, you can just drag it onto the screen here, or you can actually search for it. And so when we move up or down, we want to determine what selection we're on in the vertical box. So we go into our determine selection function. What we're going to basically do is check against all the children in the vertical box, see if we're currently on that index. If we are, display it as the gray button. And if we're not, we're going to display it as the blue button. Additionally, we will want to move the scroll box to fit the new element in the screen if it is currently off the screen or out of view due to the scroll. And to make this work, we are going to grab our sessions vertical box and then get all children. And this is going to return all of our session list elements that we have in here. We want to loop through them. That way we can look at them one at a time. And that's what we've got right here. Now, we want to see the index of the array if it matches the current index. So we can take our array index and make sure it's not equal to integer, the current index. If it's true that these are not equal, then we know that this is not the child we are on, so we can display it as the blue box. Okay, so current index not equal to, and then we need to get the actual element and then call setBrush on it to change its display. So again, if it's true, we can drag off the array element. We can cast to the type of widget that it is, because right now they're just all children. They're just all widgets. We want to cast it to the session list element, because that is what the child will be. And then off of here, you can grab your session background. That is what we had to make a variable earlier. That is this guy right here. And he is a variable. Then we drag off of the session background and type set brush. Then when you get set brush, you can right click on the in brush to split the struct pin, and you'll get more options here. The in brush image you can use as your not selected icon, not selected list element. And for me, that is my command list border right here, the blue one. You can see that's the one I am using. And everything else in here is fine as default. So you see that's how we got all of this logic right here. Now, if the branch returns false, that means that the current index is equal to the index in the array that we're looking at. And that means that we are on that selection. So we should highlight it as the one the player is selecting right now. So we still want to take the array element and we still want to cast it to a session list element and grab the session background. But when we call set brush, I'm using my other image, and that is my command list border selected. That's my gray button. Additionally, since we are on this one, if this one is out of view, we want to make sure the scroll box will scroll to it. So after setting the brush, I am also calling scroll widget into view. And to get this function, we want to take our session list scroll box, get it. We want to call scroll widget into view. And it requires the widget that you want to scroll into view. We have that already. That is our session list element. So we can drag off that, plug it in the widget to find. I had the animate scroll as checked, so it will look like it actually scrolls to it as opposed to just snapping to it. Scroll destination as into view is good. You have a few other options you can play around with. And I don't add any padding to it. But we do this, so it will scroll to that option. So if it's off the screen because of the scroll box, it will now be visible. All right, and at this point, we have one other thing we need to do, and that is make it so when we start up the session list, the top element is selected. Because right now, it waits until we press down to actually mark the one box as gray. The top one doesn't start as gray. It's only gray when you navigate to it. And to do that, we can go to our event construct. And at the very end, we actually want to call that determine selection function. And after doing that, when we come into our session list and join, you'll see the top element is gray right away. Now that is our session list navigation essentially complete. There is one thing we need to do for the actual max selections amount. So remember in event construct, we were setting this value here. And I said this only works for the temporary solution of adding these session list elements to the vertical box. Well, how it really works and how our search works now is when we go into this widget, it starts searching for all available sessions. And you saw this in the previous episode of the online gameplay. So since we have that working, the sessions are coming in when we call a function add session to list. In here is where we actually add the children, the session list elements, to the vertical box. And so whenever we do this, I want to update the max selections to how many children are in that box. So in add session to list function that we already had, I've now added this logic in here, which is just the same logic that we had in the construct, but it's going to do it every time we add a new session to the list. So again, sessions vertical box, get the children count, and set max selections to that. And there we go, guys. We have finished our session list navigation. So you can actually navigate through all of the session elements, and you'll be able to select the session that you want come the next episode so that you can actually join that session. And there's a lot more we have to do from there to get everything working in online play. But now we're really, really close to getting that process complete. So anyway, guys, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to my Patreon members and supporters again. I really appreciate it. I hope you are enjoying the series and your benefits. For anyone that's new here, please subscribe if you enjoyed this video and it helped you. It would be really beneficial to me and really helps the channel out a lot, so I'd be very grateful. If you had any issues following this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I would be happy to help you with any of the problems you ran into, and it is completely free. But otherwise, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.